Hi everyone, welcome to BRICS Briefs. Today we have another first-time guest to the show from the USA, Mel Madison, author, entrepreneur, and fintech executive. Mel Madison is a writer and financial services veteran. Leveraging over 20 years' experience in the realm of high finance, he brings real-world authenticity to his fictional narratives, which we'll get into. Having served as the CEO of 3 separate FINRA and SEC-regulated broker-dealers, Mel combines insider knowledge with a critical eye toward the economic forces that shape all our lives. With a knack for deconstructing jargon and making the complex understandable, Mel sheds light on the sometimes dark and confusing corners of finance. He holds an MBA from Duke University and studied creative writing at Loyola University Chicago. In Quaz, the fiction book we're going to be talking about, Mel weaves together a tale of monetary mayhem that strikes deep directly at the core of American power and economic might. He pulls characters seemingly out of the screen of Margin Call, Boiler Room, and The Wolf of Wall Street, delivering an epic thrill ride packed with action, intrigue, and a healthy dose of economic realism. As Thomas Jefferson wrote, banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. Let's bring Mel on. All right. Hi, Mel. Welcome.
Hello, Clive, and thank you for that great introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. No, I really appreciate you coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. It's a busy time, so, well, it is for us. We're, the BRICS 2024 Summit in Kazan is coming up, and we're sort of getting ready for that. And so, yeah, it is quite a busy time, and I guess not for everyone. Depends on your season, in which country you are. But so I wanted to go a little bit lighter, but as we were just talking about, Mel, for a little while, you sort of laid out, because it's the first time I've met you, and it was a really good chat. So, but we're going to share with the audience, and feel free to repeat, like it's no problem. Address the audience. It's totally fine. So I'll ask you the first question. We aren't doing a fiction show today, but we are going to ask Mel about his fiction book. So stay with us for that. Which I found very intriguing. Mel, as a practiced financial professional, how do you see the sanctions policy currently enacted and continuing, and the future sanctions policy remarks from Trump?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Clive, and I appreciate you having me on and the ability to address this audience. I think, as we discussed, there's a lot going on, and I'm very interested to see what's going to happen later this month in Kazan. I think that things are on the move, right? We're in a very important period. So just to take one step back before I get to the sanctions is, I believe we're entering into a period that is probably as important, or perhaps more important, than where we were at more or less exactly 80 years ago. So for your listeners, 80 years ago, 1944, there was a very large conference in New Hampshire in the United States called Bretton Woods. This was essentially a meeting attended by 50 plus nations that was set up to develop what will be the world economic monetary system post World War II. The Allies felt pretty confident by 1944 that they were going to win, and they realized we need a economic system to be put in place. What many people may not realize is that at this conference, the lead negotiator for the United States was a man named Harry Dexter White, who was a Soviet agent, actually. And then from the Britain side, you had John Maynard Keynes, who was one of the most well-known economists of the 20th century. And they came up with essentially the Bretton Woods system with the dollar as a reserve currency. And this has essentially been the economic world we've lived in for 80 years. And I think we have never seen a period that we're going to see in the next 10 years since then, which is a complete shift in the way monetary policies and matters are taken care of. Now, we can get into that later, and I'm happy to do that, but I would like to actually answer directly your question about sanctions. So, and it ties into that. So So part of what came out of Bretton Woods was the United States dollar as reserve currency. This was argued against by John Maynard Keynes. There's large academic information about the folly of having an individual country's currency as the reserve currency, that it will create essentially a debtor nation. This is called the Triffin dilemma. And again, we can get into that, but I want to get to your point. So sanctions were a big mistake, right? Because, and I think, Trump had some points. I took down some notes. So he said, Trump says he doesn't love sanctions in a July Bloomberg interview. And he said, I quote, "I found them very useful with Iran, but I didn't even need sanctions with Iran so much. I told China that, and Russia in a similar position." And I think what Trump was getting at with those sanction views is his recognition that there are two sacrosanct commodities, if you will, assets, if you will, in the world economy. And those are the US dollar and oil. And once you begin messing with the dollar or oil, you're heading into shady territory. So if you look at Russia, even though the war with Ukraine, all the sanctions, they continue to deliver natural gas and oil. And the dollar is very similar. And so these are two things that have essentially been for 80 years, like off limits. Don't mess with the dollar, treasuries, don't mess with oil. The US broke that rule. We went and we weaponized the dollar. And that was a clear signal to Brazil, to Russia, to India, to China, to South Africa, to all the BRICS, as well as the countries that want to join the BRICS, which I believe is like 80 some countries right now, to say, hey, yeah, we can no longer like be beholden to this USD system, because treasuries are electronically controlled and they can control them and stop them. So this is a hugely dangerous move. And I think Trump recognizes that. Trump is a businessman.
It's not good for America either.
No, it's not good for America at all. No.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, yeah. but what we do is we provide a very a commoditized solution, which is how do you transact internationally, cross-border, right? So take a step back. What does the USD actually do? It doesn't hold value, obviously, right? I mean, if you go back 100 years, I mean, the US dollar has lost like 97% of its value. So it's not a store of value. Yeah. And I think that needs to be, and that's being clearly recognized. And that is why when you look at the IMF COFR data, you're seeing USD treasuries as a percent of foreign reserves, it's just down and to the left. Like it was over 70% of US dollar foreign reserves on central bank balance sheets 20, 30 years ago. One thing that a lot of people do is they look at IMF data and they look at it as FX reserves on central bank balance sheets, and it shows 70% to like 55%. But what they're not doing is they're looking at FX reserves, meaning foreign currency. They're not looking at total reserves. And what has happened is gold has soared. So when you look at it that way, if you look at it as FX plus gold as foreign exchange, it's gone from over 70 to less than 50. So it's even worse than what a lot of this COFR IMF data shows. So we are on a long-term trajectory path of USD treasuries. Half of it has basically been wiped out as far as foreign reserves. This is going to continue. And then you got a weaponization of the dollar against Russia. And so what's happening is it's becoming very, very, very clear to all nations that holding treasuries is no longer a viable solution. And so the dollar, in my opinion, is dead as a reserve asset. It is still a reserve currency. And there's an important difference there. Currency meaning cross-border transactions, it's still being used. As a reserve asset, it's done. People are moving to gold, and that's just going to continue. And in my opinion, within the next 10 to 20 years, we'll see dollars as a reserve asset be down to around 20%. And the reason why I think 20% is a good number is because the United States GDP is still around 20% of global GDP. So the natural point for the dollar as a reserve asset should be at around its percentage of GDP, and that's 20. So that's where we're heading,
That makes
and
sense.
BRICS are completely right to continue along this path.
Yeah, right. That's very interesting. I mean, that does make sense in proportional contribution to the world economy.
Yeah.
And people hold that asset to, yeah, that's very interesting. Well, let me ask the next question then, because this is sort of our theme, right? We're talking about sanctions and tariffs and de-dollarization, and it's a fairly covered topic on when we talk about BRICS. This is usually the narrative, but on the subject of tariffs, so there are substantial tariffs that Trump has put on the agenda. You know, with his recent marks of use, as you noted. Tariffs aren't new or controversial, really, as they were a main part of the revenue and nation-building policy of the early USA. They obviously will have an effect on BRICS countries trading with the USA. What do you think of the role of tariffs?
Yeah. And just one last point on that 20% number. So, as somebody who worked for large asset managers, we used to manage multi-billion-dollar portfolios for institutional investors during my time at Russell Investments and different firms. And what we tried to do, and this is part of modern portfolio theory and efficient market hypothesis, which I don't believe markets are efficient, but the point is that if 20% of global equities are, let's say China plus Japan, then you want to hold around 20% in China and Japan. You want to hold the market. And so I think what the world central banks are heading to is to head towards a currency FX reserve system that mirrors global GDP. And so right now the US is around 20. It's probably going to head quickly to 15. It was around 50 plus post WW2. So it's been on this very downward slope. It's going to continue to do so, and I think that an appropriate amount of reserves is somewhere around the percentage of U.S. GDP. So just to tie a bow on that one is what I think they need to go to. Now, if we looked at your second question, which was it around sanctions or
on tariffs? I mean, particularly because
tariffs. Yes. Oh, yes, tariffs. I love tariffs.
Okay.
No, I do love tariffs. This was, and I'm someone who's done a lot of historical research into the United States. So if you go back to Thomas Jefferson, you don't even have to go back to Thomas Jefferson. You can go back even further. You can go back to George Washington, our first president. The economy was built upon tariffs, right? So the United States, for people that aren't aware, did not have an income tax until 1913, which happened to be the same year that we created the Federal Reserve. So these are not, disconnected. Like, there's a very large overarching theme to United States monetary and economic policy. It deals with global finance, it deals with taxation, it deals with international banking cabals, it deals with all of this. And to truly understand the situation the world has found itself in, you really have to understand all of this. This is what I have essentially spent like 20 years researching, reading books, studying. But if you go back to 1913, that was the year the Federal Reserve was established in a December 23rd congressional, like at the eve of Christmas, right? Like this was just tried to pass through. The United States has been completely anti-central bank from its founding. People that don't understand the United States history of central banking, they should understand that, okay, like you got to go back to 1694 to really understand central banking, which was when William III created the Bank of England. The entire reason for the creation of a central bank was essentially to rob the population of its wealth. William III had basically been bankrupt. He had spent all of his money. He could not pay back his debts. He was the sovereign of England, and he wanted to continue a war with France, and he had no funding. And he said, how can I fund this? And he went to wealthy individuals in London, in the city of London. There you go. He went to wealthy individuals in the city of London. He said, how can I fund my wars against France? And the individuals at the city of London said, we've given you money. You haven't paid us back. You're bankrupt. We're not giving you any more money. And he said, okay, well, what else can I do? And you know what they came up with was they said, give us the power to print money. This was the power that the Bank of England received from the sovereign, and it was to print money. And the whole principle, and this is very simple, and I don't want people to think that this is not correct because it's simple, but this is how simple it is. The king said, you can print money, but then you need to give the real money, the gold, the silver, to me. And so what he did is he said, we're going to allow you to create the Bank of England. What you're going to do is you can print money, Bank of England notes, just like if you look at a US dollar today. I have a US dollar right in front of me today. Here's a $20 bill. What it says right on the front is, you can see that, Federal Reserve note. This is not created by the United States. This is a Federal Reserve note. What William did is he gave the Bank of England the right to print money. And he said, what you're going to do is you're going to take in gold and silver from the population and you're going to give them paper money. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the gold and silver from the people and you're going to give it to me, the sovereign. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that gold and silver to build a fleet of naval ships, to pay soldiers, to do what I need to do to prosecute my war against France. And this was the entire creation of the central banking system. It was to essentially, and what he did is he put in legal tender. It also says on there legal tender for all debts, public and private. So you're necessitating legal tender, needs to be a Bank of England note, and then you're telling the people the only way you get Bank of England notes is if you deliver your gold and silver to the Bank of England, and then the Bank of England is going to give it to the king, and then the king is going to pay back 3-4% interest. And so this is essentially, the first instance of quantitative easing in 1694. And this system has been perpetuated for over 300 years, which is essentially governments taking money from the people, exchanging it for paper notes from a central bank. It's a completely bankrupt system. People are starting to realize that. You're seeing Bitcoin. You're seeing BRICS countries recognize that this USD hegemonic system is completely bankrupt, sham, Ponzi scheme, no doubt about it. And that is what is continuing to go on. And that's what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion, is people recognizing this and moving away from it. And it's going to be catastrophic, if you will. It's going to be, revolutionary. The world economic system is going to be very different 10 years from now than it is right now, because the system as it's set up simply cannot continue. I'll add one more thing and let you ask another question, but we're sitting here recording on 10/10. So the United States fiscal year just ended on 9/30, 10 days ago. For the first time since World War II, the United States is now spending more money on interest payments than it is on defense. This is just it's unsustainable. It's absolutely unsustainable. And no matter who wins the election in November, whether it's Harris or Trump, all they want to do is spend, and cut taxes. So this is absolutely unsustainable. And what every BRICS nation, every other nation has recognized is that the dollar is worth, I don't know. You might as well use it as toilet paper, to be honest with you, because it's completely worthless. It's going to zero. It's going to zero. And inflation is the only way out of this. And not only is inflation the only way out of this for Western nations, it's also the only way out of this for Brazil, for China. The well has been poisoned. And this is where, maybe your audience might not be familiar with my views, but my views are that both BRICS nations as well as Western nation banking systems have basically come together, that they're not that different. And that if you actually look at the Chinese Industrial Bank, CIB, if you look at what's going on with the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, which basically is announcing stimulus plans, what you'll recognize is that these nations understand that they also need to inflate their currencies. And so what you're seeing is, whether you're talking about Western nations like the UK or the United States, or you're talking about BRICS nations like China, they need to inflate their currency. The MOF, the Ministry of Finance, just announced special funds for buying Chinese equities. And from my information, which is internal information,
Mm.
there have been recent announcements about $1-2 trillion yuan of stimulus. My information is that they're preparing 10 to 12 million yuan stimulus packages. That this needs to continue. That Xi Jinping has essentially blinked. That he has said, "Look, I thought that we could, handle this depression in the Chinese real estate market, and we could survive." And he's starting to believe that that's not possible, and he's finding himself backed into the same corner that Western nations have found themselves backed into, which is essentially backed into a corner by the cabal banking system,
Mm.
Rothschild clan and their descendants, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, that he's being backed into this corner. And we are going to see money printing in China in the next 12 months, and that the yuan actually needs to be devalued against the USD. And so this is just presenting
Wow.
a picture of gold is the only money. And this is my belief. JP Morgan said it in his testimony to Congress in 1812, gold is money, nothing else. And that whether you're talking about BRICS or Western nations, I hate to say it, but fiat currencies are toilet paper.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. And actually, on the channel, we want honest critique of BRICS, because I think our audience, and I do, see the potential of BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, those initiatives as a positive thing, and there's hope and there's optimism potentially, right? But we want to be realistic, because it's been very pessimistic for so long. But we're thinking, okay, the freedom movement has been going on for a few years now, and that's pushing along, right? And then BRICS sort of pushing along. But we need to be realistic as citizens. We need to deal with ourselves like adults, like responsible adults, which is something that I think we can all continue to improve. So we I know some of the audience may be disappointed, but I think they're mature enough to say, okay, let's hear Mel out. So
Yeah, well, I hope so. And,
yeah.
and then let me say this. Okay, look,
Mm.
I have no doubt that the United States is an aggressive, hegemonic power that attempts to, implement its will upon whatever it takes over. And I would also add to this, not that this is necessarily very important, but I live in North Carolina, right,
Mm.
of the United States. My ancestry goes back a little while in this country. I have ancestors who died fighting against the United States, right? So I'm a conquered people, right?
Mm.
I'm in a conquered state. The largest war the United States ever fought was our Civil War. If you look at the total number of dead from like World War II or World War One, it's nothing compared to our Civil War in the
Oh.
1860s. And my family on my side, we fought and tried to kill, people from the United States government. So, I
Yeah.
have ancestors who have died fighting the United States. We did not want to be conquered by the United States, but we were. And eventually we had to give into it, right? And I live in a conquered territory. The state of North Carolina said, no, we do not want to be under Washington, D.C. and these money bagger type people from the
Mm.
North. And we fought against them, and we tried to kill them, and we died. And we fought against them, and we died. So I've gone through it, right? Like I've gone through what all these other countries have gone through. My not me personally, but my
Yeah.
family and my ancestors have fought against and died fighting the United States government. So yeah, I'm no fan of Washington D.C. As I told you, Clive, before we came on, I've never voted for president. I've
Mm.
never voted for one president. I do not want to acknowledge that anybody is a legitimate leader of me. I don't want to say that Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or any of these people are people who I support and I believe should be my leader. I come from a area of the country that has never really wanted to be under the yoke of the New England. Like basically, it's an expansion. It's an expansion. I mean, you can go back all the way to Rome, right? You can go back to Rome. It's like a Roman expansion. And then if you go back to my real ancestry, so my family came to Tennessee in the United States in the 1600s. But if you go back before that, it was actually Norwegian ancestry. Now, Norwegian ancestry, we're one of the last groups of people that were taken over by the Christians, right? So my ancestry, it comes from like a pagan Viking like group. And I really have no desire to be part of what is basically a Bank of England. You know, this is not this is not what I want to be a part of. And my ancestors have fought and died against it every step of the way, right? We have fought Rome. We have fought England. We fought the United States. We just lost, you know, and you have to admit, like we lost. Like they're a strong government, right? The United States is it's a powerful entity, and you know it's you know my family wanted to just basically we're in our state, we're going to do what we want to do. A lot of people made it about slavery, but that was part of it. But the other part of it was when this country was founded, it was founded as a nation of states. It was founded as the United States of America. And it was not founded to be essentially controlled by a small group of people in Washington, D.C. And so, yes, there is a racism element to people who want to support the South and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there is a very large control mechanism that just keeps growing and growing and growing. And what happened is they beat us in the Civil War. That was in the 1860s. Then you had World War One. The United States moved to a different level. Then you had World War II. And by the end of World War II, it was this Washington elite class that just controlled the world. So I was just part of the early, you know, the early I don't know what you would call it, control group. And and this control group has kept expanding, right? And so I'm not for it at all. And I'm also not here to sugarcoat people and tell them the BRICS are perfect because there are very, very big problems in the BRICS. Number one, China is a wreck. Okay. People that might think China has a great economy, they don't. Okay. China used to do, you know, 15, 16, 17% credit growth year over year. It was a growing economy. But what happened is they were building, you know, bridges to nowhere. They were building homes. And what happened with China is there's a fundamental problem with the Chinese consumer. This is what it is. The Chinese consumer remembers Mao Zedong. The Chinese consumer remembers what it's like when you don't have anything. And so what they do is they save, they don't spend. The American consumer spends. If you just funnel money back into China, what happens is people just save it and then they want to put it somewhere. Where do they put it? Recently, they put it into real estate. Well, what happened to real estate? Complete real estate bubble. Okay, so and before that, it was equity. So you had Chinese equities go through a bubble, then you had Chinese real estate, and now you've got the Chinese consumer. They've got money. They don't want to put it anywhere, and they don't want to consume. They don't want to buy fancy cars. They don't. They do to some extent, but not to the extent that Americans do. And so, what Xi Jinping actually needs to do is he needs to convince the Chinese consumer to spend money. Like that's his only hope. And if he thinks that he's going to have the PBOC lower reserve rates by 50 basis points, and that's going to all of a sudden stimulate his economy to 6 or 7% growth, he's nuts. And so this whole world economy, whether you're talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, United States, it is now going through I would call it a you know, just a disastrous maybe, but it's just a major transitional phase. And the key in the problem is that it's all based upon fiat currency and it's all based upon economic growth. If you have real money, if you have gold as money, you will see that, money can, values can go up, values can go down, but people that own gold, they're keeping their pace no matter what. And
Mm.
so what we need to do if we want to move away from this, whether we're in the West or we're in the East, is we need to move away from this central bank controlled fiat money currency, which also goes back to the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, and a lot of these European banking clans that have existed for decades. So we've got a whole system that we're fighting against, and it's not US versus China. It's actually more average American and average Chinese against a banking elite.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's many people who are reasonably informed that would disagree with you. But that's a really interesting perspective. You go about we were saying about your actual your history, your family history. I've never heard anyone speak like that. Actually, that's very very interesting. Again, and I've said this a few times on other shows. I hope we interview people because we see that this is someone who we think the audience would appreciate, and then so I hope the audience does appreciate, and I try to provoke our guests to tell us, really what they think. So yeah, I appreciate you laying that out. That's
Nobody's killed nobody's killed more Americans than the army that my ancestors fought for.
yeah, that's I don't think people ever really think about that. I've never thought
That's the
about
way
like that at all.
well,
Yeah,
that's
because
the
I
way
know.
we do it here, man. We fight against each other, man. We got guns in every house. I got 9 mm. I got stuff back in the closet there, and we have the right to bear arms, and we fought against these people. I'm in North Carolina. The very first state to succeed from the Union was South Carolina. It was just a couple hours down the road.
Oh,
Fort Sumner. I mean, no, Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant. People want to talk in the United States like everybody loves Abraham Lincoln. Like this guy was a Stalin. This guy was a Mao Zedong. This is the United States. This entire narrative of the United States being some sort of free country that just populates democratic ideals is bullshit. Okay, it's bullshit.
right.
This is a country where if you didn't go and fight for us, you get shot dead in the streets. You go and look at the New York riots in 1862. You have people getting shot dead in the streets because they did not sign up for the Union Army when Lincoln initiated the draft. You have Lincoln, suspending the writ of habeas corpus, which was essentially the right to a trial. Like he just went out and arrested people. If you didn't want to do anything, you just got arrested. The United States has been run by dictators. Okay, we were talking before the show about FDR. FDR was elected 4 times, 16 years. By this 4th time, he was completely out of it. Now, number one, this guy was already had polio. This is the guy that's leading us through World War II, right? His wife was running like this country. People that think that we run by some sort of democracy are absolutely nuts. We have no democracy in this country. What we have is a controlled elite that manages everything. They manage MSNBC. They manage NBC. The United States is perhaps the most sophisticated, propagandized dictatorship the world has ever seen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm laughing, but sometimes you laugh because it's true, so true, and then it's a reaction.
It is true, and I'm sick of people saying that we live in some sort of a free country where you get to vote and people get to decide. That's not what happens in this country. This country is just the most sophisticated liars in the world. We are not a free country. We are just as free as China, as Brazil, as anybody, as Russia. We are controlled in this country. We do not have the right to truly determine our leaders. We do not live in a true democracy. And when Americans come out and say we're like the beacon to the world of true democracy, I laugh. And that's why I've never voted for president, because we are not a free country. We've never been a free country. Whenever push has come to shove, you know what the United States government has done? They put guns to our heads and told us what to do. When you want to not go to Vietnam, what do? They send military governments, they send the National Guard to universities, they shoot students, and they say,
Yep.
you're going to go off to war and you're going to go fight or else. And the same thing happened in the Civil War. The same thing happened throughout our history. And my ancestors fought against it. And we said, no, this is not right. We formed a union of states where states were sovereign. That's what we call it, the United States. If you look at the use of the term of state in the English language, what does state mean? State normally means nation.
Yeah.
If you say Israel is a state, it's a state. It's a nation. North Carolina is a state. Virginia is a state. Washington, D.C. should not be telling us what to do. We freely entered into a union in 1789. 1789 was when the Constitution. So for people that don't know, we had 1776, we had independence. We got independence. We had a constitution. It was not really a constitution. It was called the Articles of Confederation. Articles of Confederation were a very loose grouping of states that mandated all the authority. What happened in 1789, which is when the Constitution was passed, was we had essentially had a federal coup. And we had people like Alexander Hamilton take over our country. Hamilton, they have things about Hamilton. Hamilton is the worst American ever. Hamilton wasn't even an American. He was more in the Caribbean. Thomas Jefferson came back as the third president, and he had his first Treasury secretary, a guy named Albert Gallatin, came in to dismantle the entire Hamiltonian economic system. The entire Hamiltonian economic system was put into place under George Washington. So Hamilton, I mean, people, they don't even understand this. Like, look, when the government of the United States was started, there was one department. It was the Treasury. The Treasury Department employed 90% of federal employees during the entire Washington administration. The Treasury Department controlled everything. And who controlled the Treasury? Alexander Hamilton. Who did Alexander Hamilton was in league with? All of the New York moneyed elite and the European moneyed elite. And this is why he put in the first central bank of the United States. Hamilton made a deal with the European bankers in London, to go back to your point, that put the entire United States in hock to the United States, basically under the control of London, the city of London. And they have continued to do it time and time and time again, these bankers in London. And this goes back to 1694 when I talked about William III. This is who controls stuff, and they still control it today. And this is how they have manipulated us for centuries. It's ridiculous.
Not just the USA, you're saying as well, right? You're saying all the countries,
the whole world,
which we showed that diagram.
Alibaba, China, the big state-owned enterprises in China, the Hang Seng, the Hong Kong authorities, the Sao Paulo exchanges in Brazil, what's happening in India. Like, all of these things are manipulated and controlled by a very small group of, and this is why we talked about before, there's two levels. There's BRICS and Western nations, and this is a state clash, and there are differences. But overarching above it all is a international cabal of financiers and bankers that goes back to the Rothschild clan, that goes back, and they oversee it all. And that is why you saw China stimulus policies come out the same week you saw the U.S. drop 50 basis points on the reserve rate. This is coordinated central bank reserve activity between the PBOC and the Federal Reserve, the BRICS and the Federal Reserve, and all of this. The power groups are all in control together.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion.
And I guess, and that's, see, if what you're saying is true and you're an expert, then I would say that for us, we need to be aware of that. And you've presented this information to us, so we're aware of it. Now we need, as citizens, we need to participate in some process and actually do what we should do, what we think we do. And again, we have experts like yourself to suggest, well, what do you think we should do? I won't pose that question right now because we have a limited time, but we'll have you back on, Mel, and let's pose that question. What should we do? And let's do a show on that, because this is exactly, anyway, sometimes I go on a little bit, but I really enjoy talking to people that are experts, and then so I'm sort of lucky in this position. I get to talk to you directly. The audience sees you. But I want to show at this point we're sort of about 17 minutes before an hour. So I did want to show your book. So let me share that. All right. Because I want to show them, who you are. But obviously, you're more than just this particular title that you've written. But and yeah, go ahead. This is your website. Actually, sorry, I've got to put it on the screen. There we go. With your book, tell us a bit, and maybe tell us about yourself too, Mel.
Yeah. No, I'll be happy to. But honestly, more important than my book or more important than me is just I want to drive home one final thought to any of
Yeah.
your audience, anybody that's listening, is this is not a West versus U.S. Western European issue, in my opinion. There is a group that lives in their private jets, that travels around and goes to their fancy houses, whether they're in Beijing or London or Dubai or Bengaluru. This is a group that looks at the rest of us as fodder to feed the fire. And if we don't understand that, if we think that it's China and Russia and India versus US, we're missing the whole point, in my opinion. The whole point is that there is an elite class that wants to control us and that uses us. And my whole point, the whole reason I talked to you about this before I came on, Clive, I said, look, I don't need to work. I've got millions of dollars. I own multiple homes. I've been very successful in finance. I'm not a Bill Gates. I'm not a Jeff Bezos. I'm not a billionaire, but I have enough to take care of myself. And my whole point, and the reason I do these things, is just to tell people, look, this is actually what's going on. It's not a myth. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not something that people are, like me, dreaming up in their heads, and it's not real. What's happening is when you go to work and you work for whatever salary you work for, and then the taxes get taken out, and then the company makes the profits, and then that goes up. What's happening is you are being used. You are the battery in the matrix system that is fueling this whole thing. And the only solution that I see is that people recognizing that and trying to break away from it. And it's not easy. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be, a price to pay for it. But I think what's important, the first step is the recognition. The first step is just understanding, yes, we do live in a quasi-slavery economy, labor wage slavery, and that this is what is happening to us. And when you see people stand up and you see people say, no, this is enough. You saw it in the United States. You saw port workers get 50, 60% raises because they had unions.
Yeah.
When you see people stand up and say, no, we're not going to keep doing your bidding, you can have things happen. And so that's all I want to say. Now, going to my book, I think what Quaz does is what I tried to do is to take all of these ideas, all of this understanding, and put it just into a fictional narrative. As you can see there, it says quantum AI, corrupt central bankers, and the blockchain collide in a stock market supernova. So it's set up to essentially create a situation, and it centers around the BIS, which we did not get into, the Bank for International Settlements, which is basically a Nazi Third Reich European control arm. And so basically that's what the book is about, and it's very interesting. Look, I'm not here to sell books, to be honest with you. I'm just here to tell the truth. People want to buy it. It's a good book. I think you'll like it. It's interesting if you're interested in these themes. But honestly, my main point is just, try to get people to understand we're living in a crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit probably quasi fiction. I'm thinking but it's fiction, but you've put into it.
Oh yeah, you read it, and there'll be things in there like there's a corrupt U.S. senator who's talking about they're going to revalue the dollar, and before they do that, they want to confiscate gold. And then in that chapter, you learn about in 1933 when the United States confiscated all gold. So I don't know if people know that, but yeah, I mean, in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, like I said, American dictator, elected 4 times, he confiscated all U.S. gold. There were postings on billboards across the United States. You need to turn in all your gold, or you're going to be fined $10,000, which at the time was the equivalent of $1 million, and face imprisonment. Yeah, if you didn't turn in your gold to the United States government in 1933, you were threatened with $1 million fine and 10 years imprisonment. Like, we need to understand this is the history of our government. Like, confiscating gold, imprisoning people for owning real money, which is gold. This is what these people do. They are criminals. They are psychopaths. Period. End of story. They continue to do it, and they do it whether you're, and maybe this is controversial for your audience, they do it whether they're on the Brazil or Russia or India or China side, and they do it whether they're on the United States, UK, France, Germany side. All of these elite financiers do the same thing, which is they manipulate and they take over the wealth that the average person actually generates through their labor.
Yeah, no, yes. I love how you're driving this home, actually. This is really good because, I mean, as I was saying to you before we started this, there's a lot of podcasters and there's a lot of guests, and they're saying very similar things, and it's said again and again and again, within the current events. And that's what particularly I liked about you when I saw you, was that this was someone has their convictions, and they're speaking from the heart, and also they're saying something different. This is something different. It's not the same thing. So at least you're going to get a view that is not the same narrative. Someone brave enough to say, again, I guess I shouldn't assert, I'm not a journalist, I shouldn't assert what you're saying is true or not, but they're willing to say what they believe, and not.
Yeah, and people can take it or leave it. People can take it or leave it.
Right.
Clive, I don't care if people believe me or not. If someone says, Mel, that guy is a crazy guy, that's fine. But you know what? In my heart, I'm saying what I believe. And this is after 20-some years working in finance, studying financial history for a long time. What I truly believe is that going back, you could go back 10,000 years to like high priests in Sumeria, that there's always a group of people who want to control everybody else and try to take advantage of them. And I think a lot of times what happens is these people try to divide us on artificial lines. In the United States, I think a lot of times they try to do it on racial lines. They try to divide white people by black people or white people by Hispanic people. I don't believe that's the real divide in the United States. I think the real divide in the United States is between the average American and this elite class. And I think it's similar in a global basis, that they're trying to divide us by BRICS and Western. And I think, and like I said, but that's not to say that the United States has not been a horrible hegemonic. Like, I totally agree with any philosophy on the show that the United States has been doing all of these horrible hegemonic things, trying to essentially manipulate and control world economies. Totally agree with that. But I think that's actually secondary to the major battle, which is what I would call financial elites versus the other 95%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when I've shown that, and I should just show that again. Let me bring that screen up again, because you mentioned the Nazis, and I think that's very, very important that people realize that Mel's not just saying that. So I just want to pull this up and focus in. So if you see here, I'll read it. The Bank for International Settlements. The Central Bank of Central Banks started in 1930 by Bank of England Governor Montagu Norman, with Nazi financier Kurt von Schroeder and Hitler's future finance minister Jean-Marie Schacht on the board of directors.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that people,
half of that board of directors was arrested for war crimes post World War II. Half of them. And then you know what happened to them? They were either pardoned or given light sentences because of how powerful they were. The Bank for International Settlements, May 1930, that's when it was created. And I will tell you this right now. The Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, they're doing the Basel III Accords. They're doing the Financial Stability Board. They're doing all the direct research on central bank digital currencies. They're doing blueprints for monetary policy. They've got Project Aurum, Project Helvetica, Project Jura. I research. I've been to the Bank for International Settlements. I was kicked out of the Bank for International Settlements. I tried to get into that building. Yes, I did. I went to Basel, Switzerland in 2022, and I was like storming the BIS. These are the top criminals. These are the people. Helmut Schacht was in charge of gold recovery from Jewish concentration camps, and he was the director of the BIS. These are people pulling the gold out of Jews that they're killing. Were directors of the BIS. This is who this organization is. That's why they don't want anybody to know about it. Every 2 months, all the top central bankers go and meet there, including the head of the PBOC, including the head of the Brazilian Central Bank, including Jerome Powell. Every 2 months, there's a weekend meeting. It starts on Sunday night. It starts with there's 3 meetings. There's the ECC, the GEM, and the AG. The ECC, Economic Consultative Committee, the GEM, the General Economic Meeting, and the AG, the All Governors Meeting. And it goes from point to point to point. And this is all detailed in my book, Quaz, where it takes place on a weekend at the Bank for International Settlements All Governors Meeting, where they come in on a Sunday night. The ECC is basically the G20. It's China, it's Canada, it's the United States, it's Brazil. It's the top. They come up with the agenda on a Sunday night. Then they go to the top floor, the 18th floor in the BIS headquarters building, designed by the same architects that designed the Bird's Nest Stadium in China. They have a gourmet meal. They have foie gras. They have wine. They discuss everything. Monday, they start off. Then they have the GEM, the General Economy Meeting. That includes another 20 or 30 central banks. And then finally, in the afternoon on Monday, they have the AG. That's the full 63 members of the BIS. This is the top 63 central banks in the whole world. Communist, everybody. You don't know. It doesn't matter who it is. Algeria, India, Russia. Well, Russia was suspended after Ukraine. And that's a whole nother topic we can get into. But all of these countries come together at the BIS and they coordinate everything. It's their whole central bank country club. Now, who owns the BIS? The BIS is owned and controlled by the central banks. Who owns and controls the central banks? The big banks. The Federal Reserve of the United States released the cap table. Who owns the Federal Reserve? Who owns the ownership shares? The number 2 companies are JP Morgan and Citibank. This is who owns these organizations. People need to understand this. If you look at the Federal Reserve Bank, they have a board of governors that's put in place by Washington, D.C. That's all kind of political. But then in the United States, we have 12 Federal Reserve branches, the Richmond branch, the San Francisco branch, the Kansas City branch, the Atlanta branch. Who owns those? Those are owned by the member banks. They're owned by the banks. This is a privately owned cartel of banks. This is what is controlling it all. And it's the same thing around the developed world. We live in a world that is controlled by the financiers. As I mentioned in my book, the second quote, Miriam Rothschild, give me the power to print and control a nation's money. I care not who makes its laws. This is what is happening. This is what is going on. And it's not just going on in the West. It's also going on in the East. And people need to understand that this is the monetary world we live in, and it is out of control.
Yeah, it certainly is out of control. Yeah. No, this is great. You're really laying it out. I really appreciate that, Mel. And it's fine because, I had some questions, but this is really what I wanted to get into because my next question was about your book, a little bit about that. And I was going to say, when I first saw you, you were in an interview on YouTube with Tom Broderick on Palisades Gold Radio. And that's when I watched your interview. It was a 2-part one. I should actually show that. Let me share that with the audience. I'll stop. I've got to do these screens, right? It's all part of the. Yeah, here we go. Let me show it. All right. So, okay. So, the screens are a bit weird on YouTube, so it doesn't show sometimes. But that was so Mel Madison part 1, Social Security and Medicare funds are in collapse. But then there was a part 2. So, but yeah, I saw you in that, and I thought, yeah, we got to talk to this guy, and and my next question was about Bank for International Settlements, and is BRICS cooperating with the BIS? And you've gone over that, so that's great.
They are definitely, and I think Yellen is in cahoots with China. I think it's not a coincidence that the China stimulus package stuff was announced the same week the United States cut 50 basis points. And I think so I look at charts, right? I look at, there's a great chart that was put out by the BIS. The BIS has great information. And it was Chinese export prices. And they were just all going down. And then they slowly started going up about a year ago. If you look at United States inflation, it peaked around a year and a half ago. If you look at United States money supply, it totally spiked. This is M2. Totally spiked during COVID, and it actually started coming down a little bit, and it bottomed around October of 2023. Now, money supply typically takes a 12, 15-month lag. We just saw today the core CPI report tick up. This is why you are seeing, and this is how, if people are listening, they want to make money, and how I make money trading is I knew when the U.S. 10-year Treasury got to 3.7%, this is ridiculous. This bond at 3.7% is absolutely ridiculous because there's no way out of this without inflation. The next 10 years are going to be full of inflation. And if you think that 3.7% is going to cover your inflation for the next 10 years, you're not. That's why it's now over 4%, right? So this is what is going to continue. Now, what people do not always understand is that they think, well, inflation means bad things for, say, stocks. No, it doesn't. Stocks are priced in nominal terms. They're priced to earn. If stocks can, if a company like Apple is making an iPhone for $200, selling it for $1,000, they're making $800. If it doubles, instead of 200, they're going to make it for 400. They're going to sell it for 2,000. They're going to make 1,600. Their earnings are going to double. And so the U.S. stock market, that's why it's at record highs, because people know inflation is coming. The stock market is going to continue going up. The real estate market is actually going to continue going up, but it's tempered because mortgage rates are going to go higher because of inflation's going higher. But at the same time, what is not going to do well is bonds. The last thing you want to own is bonds. And this is what these central banks are realizing. That's why they want to get rid of U.S. Treasuries. The worst asset in the world is the United States Treasury bond. That is, it's toilet paper. If you have, like, China literally owns billions of dollars of bonds of the U.S. that are paying like 1.5%. They were buying bonds in like 2021 that were yielding 1.5%, and they have 1.5%. They want to get rid of that. Of course they do. They need to own gold. That's the only thing, because guess what? They're also going to have to inflate yuan. The renminbi is not going to hold its value. The Brazilian real is not going to hold its value. The USD is not going to hold its value. The euro is not going to hold its value. The yen is not going to hold its value. The only thing that's holding its value is gold. And if you look at gold, you look at beginning of this year, what was gold at and what was the stock market at? Looks like the stock market had a great year. In US dollar terms, the stock market has a great year. It's up 20%. In gold terms, the stock market is down 15%. So because gold is up 35%, stock market's down 20. Is up 20. In gold, every asset is going down in value. In the dollar, everything is going up. And so this is why I come back to the belief, and this is only going to continue. I will be shocked. I hope I could come on in 6 months or 12 months, and I will bet you in a year, here's my predictions. S&P is going to be at close to 7,000 a year from now by the end of 2025.
It's going to keep going.
Yes, it is, because of inflation. Gold is going to be close to 4,000. All right.
Wow.
This is what is happening. And the dollar is just it's losing its value. And here's why, because that's what they want. You know why? Because they have huge debt. And how do you get rid of debt without paying it off? You inflate it away. You inflate it away. This is what they are doing. They know what they're doing. Yellen is not an idiot.
Well, that means bread's going to cost twice as much, 3 times as much, right?
Yeah. That's what's going to happen. That's
not good. Yeah.
Okay. So who does it hurt? Here's what you got to ask. If you live paycheck to paycheck, what do you want? You want zero inflation and zero wage growth? Or do you want 10% inflation and 12% wage growth. So the average American is going to begin to prefer 8-9% inflation so long as they get real wage growth.
Mm.
The average American who owns homes, who owns stocks, who owns gold is going to want inflation. Who is going to get hurt is going to be savers, meaning people that own U.S. Treasury debt. Who owns Treasury debt? Foreign central banks.
Yeah, right. Oh, okay, right. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. Okay. So the good thing about YouTube is people
BRICS,
know.
yes, this is why the BRICS want to move away, because they recognize the U.S. play here. The U.S. play here is we can inflate our currency as much as we want. It's good for poor Americans. Doesn't matter as long as their real wages go up. It's good for Americans that own homes or cars or whatever. Their asset values go up. The only people who get hurt with inflation are savers, people that own USD, treasuries. Who owns it? Foreign central banks. This is why China, Russia, this is why everybody knows in the BRICS, they need to get rid of USD treasuries. As my friend Luke Roman says, anybody holding USDs, they're the sucker at the card table. They're the sucker at the card table. Anybody holding treasuries is the sucker at the card table. You got to get rid of treasury debt, and that's it. Otherwise, you're going to be fine. If you own houses, if you own gold, if you own stocks, whatever it is, it's just going to, if you work for a living, your wages, everything's just going to adjust. But what's going to happen is if you're a saver, you're going to be screwed. And so that's why central banks know we need to hold gold. And you don't want to hold yuan. You don't want to hold renminbi, because the same thing's going to happen. You know, Xi's going to understand the only way he's going to get China out of this problem is they've got to inflate away the yuan. I mean, they really do. I mean, this plan of like 1-2 trillion yuan stimulus, it's nothing. They need 10-20 trillion yuan stimulus package to really get the Chinese economy moving. And that's going to really, the yuan is at 7-8 to the dollar. It should probably be 10 to 12 to the dollar. So the yuan is completely overvalued right now. We've got problems all around the world with fiat currencies. And that's why I go back to, this isn't a BRICS versus US. This is a money global elite versus the rest of us. And all of these fiat currencies need to be blown out. And you're going to see $5,000 gold in the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see 10,000 S&P in the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see the yuan trading 12, 13 to the dollar. This is what's going to happen, because we're going through a massive monetary reset, in my opinion.
No, sure, yeah. I'm laughing because it's just like 10,000. I mean, people must be thinking right now. I expect if they're thinking, if they're traders and that, they're going, I should just get into the stock market.
Well, why wouldn't you? In 2009, the S&P traded down to 666. It's on the verge of 6,000 right now. That's 15 years ago. It's up 10 times. Do you know what it would be? S&P would be worth if it goes up 10 times in 15 years. It's at 6,000. 10 times 6, that's 60,000 S&P in 15 years. If it does the same percentage move, this is what markets do. I could go back to 1780 to like English bond issuance of like 500,000 pounds, and that was a huge issuance for like a sovereign issue. 500,000 pounds. No. Now we're at billions and trillions. No, in 20 years, $10,000 is going to be $1,000. In 20 years, that's what's happened. That's what's going to happen, because that's what's always happened. You have to understand. I'm old enough now. I've seen it happen. When my father was a young man, he was in La Jolla, California, which is this beautiful seaside town. And he put a $5,000 down payment down for a double lot property, oceanfront in La Jolla. Put $5,000 down. The price was $30,000. If you wanted to buy those 2 lots today, $5 million. $5 million. Whoa. This is a $30,000 piece of real estate in 1965. That's 60 years. In 60 years, it went from 30,000 to 5 million. That is what happens in our lifetime. That is what is happening. $1,000 today is going to be $100 10 years from now. Period. End of story. That's what's happening.
Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah. Well, okay. We're going over a bit. We're about an hour and 10, but that's okay. Let's let's finish up. Mel, I really appreciate you going over and being with us, and you've given it, and I love it. And in 6 months, yeah, let's come back. Let's not just for your prediction, but let's tell us about how your books has gone and maybe some feedback about. I'd love to hear what people thought of the book. If anyone buys the book, tell Mel what you think and make a comment and give us a bit of a review. That would be really cool. I'm fascinated. I'm definitely thinking about buying it. So, but that's just your book. I'm just saying, because I like reading. But yeah, let's end off. Thank you very much, Mel. I will. We'll end off, and yeah, if you've got any final comments, go ahead.
Here's my only final comment is I appreciate you having me on, and I know I can be a little bombastic, but I really do believe if you look back and you look at what has truly happened, that's how amazing it is. I mean, 2009, S&P is at 666. The Dow was at 6,000. The Dow is at 42,000. That's 15 years ago. If you look at that and you think about what could possibly happen, you have to open your mind and you have to recognize that we are actually at the beginning of this hyperinflationary bubble, and that the dollar is on a path to nowhere. And this is what is happening. And people that are buying 10-year bonds at 4%, I think are stupid. People that are buying the stock market, people that are buying land, people that are buying gold, people that understand, and this is the China Silk Roads Initiative. China's not stupid. They're not spending their money on buying U.S. treasuries anymore. They're buying copper fields in Africa. They understand where value is. And so the BRICS are making the right moves. These people are just as smart as I am, probably smarter. They understand what's happening, and they're getting out of the dollar. They just can't do it all at once, because if they just do it all at once, it collapses it screws things up. But the path is clear, and this is where the world is moving. The dollar's days are done, and that's where we're heading, and we're heading to a new world. And in 5-10 years, it's going to look completely different. And I think if people prepare, people own real assets, people own things that are going to do well in an inflationary environment, they're going to be very happy. And I hope, I've shed some light on that, and I appreciate you having me. And if you're interested in these themes, buy Quaz. I think you'll enjoy it as a fictional book. But thanks for having me, Clive, and I'm happy to come back anytime you want.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mel. Excellent advice. All right. Okay. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode and you wish to join the conversation, you can comment below. Please like and share this episode and spread it as far as possible. We're putting together a plan to bring you right into the middle of the Kazan Summit. We want you to be more than just spectators. We want you to be part of the action. We're funding this ourselves, so if you want to support our efforts, you can do so with a super thanks, through donations on our Buy Me a Coffee page, or just by spreading this video around to your network. Any contribution you can make is appreciated. Thanks for tuning into BRICS Briefs. Don't forget you can follow us on our Substack and other social media platforms, especially our Telegram channel, for daily news on BRICS, all linked below. Stay curious, stay connected, stay optimistic. Let's keep exploring together. So long.